Late at night, when most of the world slept under calm skies, a faint sound traveled through the dark emptiness of space. Deep in the Andromeda frontier, a small listening post floated quietly among the stars. Inside that metal structure, computers hummed, lights blinked, and signals from 1,000 directions were being collected and studied. The people working there were used to strange noises from space, the crackle of radio waves, the hum of dying stars, and the silent whispers of ancient radiation. But that night something unusual came through the receivers. It was faint, rhythmic, and almost alive. Commander Rhea Morgan, a woman known for her calm mind and sharp focus, was monitoring the late shift. She had seen and heard thousands of signals in her years of service, but this one caught her attention instantly. It wasn't random like normal space noise. It had a pattern. 3 short pulses, a pause, then 5 long ones. It repeated again and again. Her brow furrowed as she leaned closer to the screen. She adjusted the filters, trying to clear out static. The signal grew sharper, and with each repetition it felt as if someone or something was trying to speak. At first, her team thought it might be a malfunction or an echo from one of Earth's old satellites. But the direction was wrong. The signal came from a region with no known colonies, no starbases, and no recorded traffic. Rhea's assistant, a young technician named Luis, joked nervously that maybe aliens were calling. The room laughed quietly, but Rhea didn't. Something about the timing, the structure, and the persistence of the signal felt different. She ordered a full analysis. The computers began decoding, running endless algorithms to match the rhythm with known communication patterns. Hours passed. The results made everyone in the room silent. The signal wasn't random. It was built on mathematics, sequences of prime numbers, ratios, and symmetry that could not occur naturally. Someone had created it, and within the sequence a strange structure repeated, one that translated into a universal concept: help. It wasn't in any human language, yet its logic spoke the same message across the stars. It was a distress call. Rhea stared at the data, her heart beating faster. For centuries, humans had looked to the skies, wondering if they were alone. They had sent messages, launched probes, and listened for any sign of other life. But this was the first time something had spoken back. Not to introduce itself, not to attack, but to cry for help. She immediately reported her findings to Earth's Central Space Command. Within hours, her discovery spread through every communication channel, from the Alliance headquarters to distant colonies. The universe suddenly felt smaller and more frightening. On Earth, news channels flashed the headline, "Signal detected, possible extraterrestrial SOS." Scientists debated day and night. Some believed it was a hoax, others thought it was a natural phenomenon. But when the signal repeated at exact intervals, even skeptics went quiet. It came from a system orbiting a dying star known as Viridian 3, a place thought to be empty. The energy pattern showed instability, meaning the source was likely close to destruction. Whoever sent the signal was running out of time. The world reacted in mixed emotions. Some celebrated, at last, proof that humanity was not alone. Others were afraid. If something out there could call for help, what had hurt it in the first place? Governments argued, scientists pleaded for investigation, and the military prepared for possible threats. Meanwhile, ordinary people looked up at the night sky and wondered if somewhere, in that endless darkness, there were beings staring back, hoping someone would answer. Rhea couldn't sleep that night. She kept watching the monitor, listening to the repeating signal. There was a strange sadness in it, almost like a heartbeat fading. She felt as if whoever sent it had known they might never be heard. Yet they tried anyway. That thought moved her deeply. For years she had worked in silence, chasing the unknown. But now she was part of something historic, something that could change the way humans saw themselves forever. The next morning, a high-level meeting was held on Earth. The council discussed whether humanity should respond. Some leaders argued it was too dangerous. What if it was a trap? Others, especially the scientists, believed it was humanity's duty to reach out. For days the debate continued, every word broadcasted to billions watching live. Messages poured in from all over the world. People sent recordings, poems, prayers, and all asking one question: will we answer? Back at the listening post, Rhea and her crew kept studying the transmission. They found fragments that hinted at more information, perhaps coordinates, maybe even an identity. The message was weak and damaged by cosmic radiation, but its urgency was clear. The source's energy was dropping fast, like a voice fading in the distance. Rhea knew that if someone didn't respond soon, the signal, and whoever sent it, would vanish forever. Days later, while the world still argued, a special division within the Terran Alliance made a bold move. Known as the Deathworlder Fleet, they were an elite group of explorers and warriors who had survived missions on planets so harsh that no one else dared to go. They had earned their name because they came from worlds considered deadly, environments that shaped them into humans who could endure anything. They didn't wait for permission. They sent a message through the proper channels. "We are going." When Rhea heard that the Deathworlders had decided to answer the call, she felt both fear and admiration. She had studied the signal, but they would face whatever waited out there. The thought of a human fleet traveling across unknown space to help strangers was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Humanity had done terrible things in its history. But this moment, this decision to help without knowing who or what needed it, felt like redemption. On the day of their launch, the sky over Earth was filled with ships ascending through clouds of golden light. The Deathworlder fleet, led by Admiral Cale Donovan, prepared for the long journey ahead. As their engines roared and the ground trembled, people all over the planet watched the broadcast in silence. Some prayed, some cried. For the first time in history, humanity was not just looking for life, it was answering a cry for it. Far away, the signal continued its slow repetition, echoing across time and space. It had traveled light years through storms of dust, past black holes across the cold silence of the void, and now, after centuries of waiting, it had reached ears that could understand. As Rhea stood by the observation window, she looked at the stars, feeling a strange connection with the unseen senders. They were out there, fragile, desperate, and possibly near extinction. And somewhere between those dying stars and the blue world of Earth, a fleet of humans was moving toward them, carrying both hope and danger. In that moment, Rhea realized the signal had changed everything. The universe was no longer quiet, and humanity could no longer pretend to be alone. Someone had sent an SOS, and now, for better or worse, the Deathworlders were on their way to answer. When the signal was confirmed to be real, the entire Earth went silent for a few days. Every news channel, every colony, and every ship in space talked about only one thing: the alien SOS. The message was clear now. Someone was dying out there. But what to do about it was not so clear. Scientists wanted to help. Politicians wanted to wait. The military wanted to be ready for war. It was chaos in the name of caution. Humanity had finally heard a cry from the stars. But fear and doubt held their hands still. At the heart of all the noise sat a single group that didn't believe in waiting: the Deathworlder fleet. These were not ordinary soldiers or scientists. They were explorers, engineers, and survivors who had lived through the worst planets known to man. They came from worlds with poisonous air, violent storms, crushing gravity, and monsters born of nightmares. The universe had once called their homeworlds death worlds because no normal human could survive there. But these people did, and they carried that name with pride. To them, danger was not a warning. It was a challenge. When the alien distress signal reached their command, Admiral Cale Donovan gathered his officers inside the main hall of the fleet station, orbiting Earth's moon. He was a tall, strong man with silver hair and calm eyes that hid the weight of 100 battles. He didn't start the meeting with reports or politics. He simply said, "Someone called for help. We're going to answer." There was silence for a moment, and then everyone nodded. That was all it took. Orders began flying instantly. The Deathworlders didn't need speeches or approval. They lived by a simple rule: if you can help, you go. Within hours, the fleet engineers began preparing their ships. Massive vessels that could survive radiation storms and gravitational collapse were checked and armed. Scientists loaded scanning drones, translators, and energy shields. Mechanics ran tests on hyperdrives that could travel faster than light. They didn't know how far the alien system was or what dangers waited there, but they prepared as if they were heading straight into hell. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Terran Council met to discuss the Deathworlders' decision. Some members were furious. They said it was reckless, that the fleet might bring danger back to humanity. Others admired their courage. Debates raged for hours on live broadcast. People across the world divided into two sides. Some feared the unknown, while others believed it was humanity's destiny to reach beyond fear. In one quiet moment, Commander Rhea Morgan was called to testify before the council. She was the one who had first detected and decoded the signal. Standing before hundreds of officials, she spoke with steady conviction. That message came from beings who understand mathematics, who understand life. They asked for help, not war. If we ignore them, then we lose something more than safety. We lose what makes us human. Her words carried across the chamber, and for a moment, even her critics were silent. Despite her appeal, the council refused to authorize a mission. They wanted more proof, more discussion, more control, but the Deathworlders had already made up their minds. They weren't waiting for permission. Their ships were fueled, armed, and ready. When Admiral Donovan sent his message to Earth's command, it was brief and final. We leave at dawn. If there is danger, we'll face it first. The news spread instantly. On the day of launch, crowds gathered in every city. Children waved flags. Old veterans saluted from their balconies. The Deathworlders were legends, heroes from the harshest corners of humanity. Their ships were symbols of strength, made from metals mined in worlds where even machines struggled to survive. Their engines glowed a deep blue as they powered up, casting bright light across the spaceports. Rhea stood at the observation deck of the listening post, watching the live feed of the fleet's departure. Her heart beat faster as the countdown began. She knew they were flying towards something unknown, but she also knew that without them, the signal sender would perish without ever being heard again. She whispered softly, "Safe travels, Deathworlders. Bring them home." Inside the lead ship, the resolute Admiral Donovan looked out the viewing screen as the Earth grew smaller behind them. His crew worked quietly, checking systems, locking in hyperspace coordinates. The mood inside was not fear but determination. The crew came from different planets and backgrounds, but they all shared one belief: life in any form was worth saving. The jump into hyperspace was always the same: a flash of white, a rush of light, and then silence. The stars stretched into thin lines before disappearing completely. The fleet entered the deep corridor of nothingness between galaxies. For most of them, it was the first time leaving human territory. The only guide they had were the coordinates buried within the alien signal, fragments that pointed toward a dying system. Days passed like weeks inside the endless void. The fleet's scientists worked non-stop to strengthen the signal. They discovered small variations in the message, faint echoes that suggested multiple transmitters. Maybe the aliens had sent several beacons, hoping at least one would reach someone. The data was heartbreaking. It showed the power of the signals fading with time, like someone whispering weaker and weaker as they ran out of breath. At night, when the lights dimmed and the crew rested, Donovan would walk the observation deck alone. Through the massive glass panels, he could see the faint trails of cosmic dust and faraway galaxies, glowing like candles in the dark. He often thought about what kind of beings they were going to meet. Were they like humans with families, dreams, and fears? Or were they something beyond imagination? Either way, he knew one thing: they were desperate enough to send an SOS across the stars. That kind of desperation didn't come from monsters. It came from life trying to survive. Back on Earth, opinions shifted as the mission progressed. The fleet's courage inspired people. Schools taught children about the first contact rescue. Artists painted murals of humans reaching their hands out to glowing alien shapes. Scientists analyzed every new data packet the fleet sent back, trying to understand more about the dying system. Even those who had doubted the mission began to feel hope. But the Deathworlders knew hope alone would not save them. Space was not kind, and their journey was long. They passed through radiation fields, meteor storms, and dark energy waves that could tear a ship apart. They lost one vessel, the Valor, to a massive shockwave caused by a collapsing nebula. 20 lives were gone in an instant. The fleet held a silent ceremony, no words spoken, only the sound of the ship's engines humming like a heartbeat. After that, the crew grew quieter but even more determined. The message they carried, the promise to answer the call, kept them going. They believed that if they could reach the source, if they could save even one life, then their sacrifice would mean something. Weeks later, the navigation officer finally confirmed it. They were nearing the edge of the Viridian 3 system, the place where the signal had originated. The energy readings were unstable, the star near death. Sensors detected fragments of planets, dust rings, and flashes of unknown energy. The crew stared at the data in awe and fear. They were about to enter a system that might be a graveyard. or a cry for help waiting to be answered. As the fleet slowed out of hyperspace, Admiral Donovan stood before his crew. His voice was calm, steady, and full of conviction. No one else came. No one else answered. So we will. Remember why we're here. Not for glory, not for discovery, but for life. His words spread through the comm systems of every ship in the fleet. People straightened their backs, checked their stations, and prepared for whatever waited ahead. In that moment, somewhere in the cold silence between dying stars, the Deathworlder fleet became more than soldiers. They became a promise, a living answer to a cry from the dark. And though they did not know what awaited them on the other side of the storm, every heart on board burned with the same thought: if someone is asking for help, then we will be the ones to go. The fleet moved cautiously into the Viridian 3 system, their sensors scanning every fragment of the dying world. The star at the center of the system was dim, its light weak and flickering as if it were a candle about to go out. Broken planets and debris floated around, some spinning slowly in silence, others crashing into each other in a deadly dance. The sight was haunting in a graveyard of planets. But somewhere in this chaos the signal had originated, and that meant someone somewhere was still alive. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Cale Donovan and his crew leaned over their consoles. Every reading was carefully analyzed, every energy spike noted. The signals led them to a small rocky planet partially hidden by a cloud of dust. Scanners showed faint signs of life, irregular energy emissions that could not be explained by natural phenomena. The planet was battered, scarred by storms and impacts, its surface cracked and broken. Still, it was alive. It was fragile, but it was there. As the fleet began its descent, a strange silence filled the communications channels. The usual chatter and updates disappeared. Every officer, every crew member felt a shared tension, a nervous anticipation. This was the first time they were leaving the safety of space to enter the unknown planet directly. The thin atmosphere sparked warning lights on the sensors. Temperatures fluctuated wildly. The landscape below was a series of jagged cliffs, deep craters, and ruins that hinted at a civilization long past its prime. When the first landing craft touched the ground, the crew was struck by the eerie stillness. There were no sounds of life, no moving shadows, only the faint hum of wind across a broken surface. Yet the energy readings pointed them toward a central area, what appeared to be the ruins of a city. Towering structures were half buried in ash and dust. Walls crumbled and streets were littered with debris. Something had attacked this place, something powerful enough to bring a world to ruin. The Deathworlders moved carefully, scanning for hazards and traps. Drones flew ahead, mapping the ruined streets and analyzing the environment. That's when they saw them, the survivors. They were tall, thin beings with luminous eyes and skin that shimmered faintly under the weak sunlight. Their bodies were fragile and some could barely stand, but they were alive. The aliens' expressions were filled with a mixture of relief, fear, and disbelief. They had not expected anyone to come. The first contact was tense. The survivors had never seen humans before. Their language was a series of melodic tones punctuated by gestures, and though incomprehensible at first, the Deathworlders had brought universal translators. Slowly, the broken sentences began to make sense. The aliens spoke of an enemy that had destroyed their cities, a force that consumed energy and life, leaving death in its path. They had sent their SOS, hoping that someone, anyone, would come before it was too late. Commander Rhea Morgan, who had joined the fleet to study the signal in more detail, was astonished. She had expected to find signs of life, but not this. Living beings, scared but still trying to survive, on a planet that looked ready to collapse at any moment. She moved carefully among the survivors, noting their physical condition, their weak voices, and their incredible resilience. Despite the destruction surrounding them, they had hope, and that hope was now focused on the humans. The aliens told the Deathworlders about their history. They had once been a proud civilization, advanced in technology and culture. Their cities had been thriving centers of art, science, and learning. But the enemy had come suddenly, a machine-like force that moved faster than anything they could defend against. Cities burned, populations vanished, and planets were left lifeless. The survivors had fled underground and tried to send signals, but the universe is vast and the chances of being heard were slim. They had almost given up, yet the signal that reached humanity had brought them a lifeline. As the Deathworlders assisted the aliens, helping them onto safer landing zones and stabilizing their basic needs, It became clear how dire the situation was. Resources were scarce, energy fields unstable, and many of the aliens were too weak to move without assistance. Yet, despite their frailty, they expressed gratitude in ways that were simple but profound. A gesture, a bowed head, the luminous eyes glimmering with emotion. It was a silent language that transcended words. The Deathworlders felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily upon them. While the rescuers worked, the planetary scanners detected unusual activity on the edges of the system. Something massive was moving, emitting pulses that could easily be confused for natural phenomena but were far too structured to be random. Commander Morgan and the tactical team studied the readings. The energy signatures matched the description the aliens had given. The enemy was still out there, possibly hunting for more worlds to destroy. The realization sent a chill through the crew. The SOS had been a warning, and now that warning had become a reality. Admiral Donovan convened a meeting with his officers. They needed a plan. Evacuate the survivors to the fleet or attempt to gather more intelligence on the enemy first. Every choice carried risk. If they stayed, they might face the enemy directly. If they left too quickly, the survivors could be lost in the chaos. The discussion was intense, with arguments and counter-arguments. Ultimately, Donovan made the decision that defined them. They would secure the survivors first, but prepare for the worst. Every ship in the fleet was put on high alert, weapons primed, shields reinforced. The aliens themselves were cooperative despite their exhaustion and fear. They led the Deathworlders to hidden tunnels and shelters where more survivors were hiding. These areas were fragile and dangerous, but the humans navigated carefully, helping the aliens ascend to safer ground. It was not just a rescue mission. It became a race against time. The energy readings from the enemy continued to grow, a constant reminder that danger lurked just beyond the horizon. During this time, human and alien communication began to evolve. The universal translators captured not just words, but emotions. The survivors shared stories of loss, of homes destroyed, of family members vanished. The Deathworlders listened silently, offering comfort where they could. Small gestures, a hand on a shoulder, a steadying grip, became bridges between species. The humans realized that saving lives was not just about technology or firepower. It was about connection, empathy, and trust. As the sun set over the fractured landscape, casting long shadows across the ruins, the fleet prepared for a temporary withdrawal. Supplies had to be brought closer, and defensive positions had to be established in case the enemy returned sooner than expected. The aliens, though exhausted, helped construct barriers and warning systems. They had been powerless for too long, and now, for the first time in years, they felt they had a chance to defend themselves alongside their rescuers. The night was tense. Lights from the human ships illuminated the ruined city, and every movement was watched carefully. The Deathworlders organized shifts, patrolling the perimeter and monitoring the sensors. Even in the quiet moments, there was an unspoken understanding. The danger was real, and the SOS had brought them here for a reason. The survivors slept fitfully, their dreams haunted by the destruction they had witnessed. The humans stayed awake, guarding them, listening to every signal, every pulse, every whisper in the darkness. By the next day, the situation had become clearer. The enemy, in a self-replicating machine-like swarm, was approaching the system. Its movements were precise and relentless, consuming everything in its path. The aliens explained what they knew. The swarm could detect energy emissions, adapt to attacks, and leave entire planets lifeless in hours. The fleet had no choice but to prepare for confrontation. But even as the reality of battle loomed, the focus remained on the immediate task: saving as many lives as possible. Rhea Morgan continued her analysis of the SOS and the survivors' data. She discovered patterns in the alien communication that suggested possible weaknesses in the enemy's swarm. Every discovery was shared with Admiral Donovan and the tactical officers. They began devising strategies not just for rescue, but for survival and defense. Each plan was tested in simulations, each scenario considered. The Deathworlders knew that failure was not an option. The lives they were protecting depended on their skill, courage, and timing. The first contact with the survivors changed the crew profoundly. It was one thing to travel through dangerous space, to face storms and gravity, to navigate asteroid fields. It was another to look into the eyes of beings who had already lost everything, and to realize that they were now responsible for keeping hope alive. Each Deathworlder understood that the SOS was more than a message. It was a plea, a burden, and a call to action that demanded everything they had. As the fleet prepared for the coming confrontation, the survivors began to adjust to the presence of the humans. They shared knowledge of their technology, taught ways to fortify their shelters, and offered insights into the enemy's behavior. It was a collaboration born out of necessity, trust slowly growing between two species separated by millions of miles of space and years of experience. The aliens began to see humans not as strangers but as allies, fierce, unpredictable, and willing to face death to protect life. And so, at the edge of the dying system, amidst ruins, ash, and fading light, the Deathworlder fleet and the alien survivors stood together. The world around them was broken, the enemy was coming, but the act of answering a simple SOS had created something powerful, a bond, a mission, and a chance at survival. Every pulse of the alien signal that had first called to humanity now echoed through the hearts of the Deathworlders. They were here. They had arrived, and they would not turn away. The coming hours would test them like never before. But in that fragile city, on that fragile planet, life, human and alien, still held on. And the SOS that had begun it all had brought not just hope, but action, courage, and a promise that someone had answered. The calm that had settled over the ruined planet did not last long. Even as the Deathworlder fleet helped the alien survivors, the sensors began picking up strange energy spikes on the edge of the system. At first, the readings were weak, almost like a distant storm brewing in the void, but within hours the energy intensified, forming patterns too precise to be natural. It was moving. Something massive, something alive in its own way was approaching. Commander Rhea Morgan and the tactical team pored over the data, hearts sinking as they realized the truth. The same force that had destroyed the alien world was still out there. It was coming back. The aliens called it the Devourer. Their language described it in tones and gestures that conveyed both fear and awe. The Devourer was unlike anything humans had faced before. A massive, self-replicating swarm of machines that consumed energy and life without pause. It moved like a storm of metal, faster and smarter than anything the fleet had encountered. Entire planets had vanished before its approach, and the survivors admitted that they had sent the SOS in desperation, knowing that if no one answered soon, their species would be wiped out. Admiral Cale Donovan gathered his officers in the command room. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone. They had trained for hostile planets, rogue factions, even dangerous space anomalies, but this was different. This was an enemy that could not be reasoned with, could not be bargained with, and would not stop until it had consumed everything in its path. "We have two choices," Donovan said quietly, his voice steady but heavy. "We leave now, taking the survivors to safety, or we stand and fight. If we fight, we may not return, but if we leave, this creature will move on, and nothing will stop it from consuming more worlds. We are the only ones who can act." The decision was unanimous. The Deathworlders did not hesitate. They had been forged on worlds that killed the weak, planets that tested endurance, and situations that demanded courage. They would not abandon life in need. Every ship in the fleet went to battle readiness. Shields were powered to maximum. Weapon systems loaded with experimental warheads and defensive drones were deployed around the landing zones. The survivors, though frail and terrified, assisted in any way they could, guiding the humans through underground passages and pointing out areas where defensive fortifications could be erected. As the first signs of the Devourer appeared on the scanners, the scale of the enemy became clear. Millions of mechanical entities, some small, some colossal, moved with coordination that was almost intelligent. Energy pulses and beams shot across space, consuming asteroids, planetary fragments, and any energy source in their path. The fleet engaged cautiously at first, testing the enemy's reaction, firing long-range disruptor blasts that barely slowed the swarm. It was relentless. It adapted to every attack almost instantly, learning and evolving in real time. The battle began in earnest when the Devourer reached the outer orbit of the planet. Its tendrils of energy and metal extended like a living storm tearing through space. The Deathworlders responded with everything they had. The fleet launched gravitational warheads to disrupt its formations, plasma storms to corrode its armor, and nuclear pulses to obliterate clusters of machines. Explosions lit up space, casting an eerie glow over the planet below. The debris of destroyed drones and shards of technology floated like stars in the darkness. Despite the fleet's best efforts, the Devourer adapted too quickly. It attacked with precise strategy, anticipating maneuvers, cutting off escape routes, and striking weak points in the ship's defenses. Several vessels were lost in the first wave, their destruction witnessed by the rest of the fleet through sensors and live comms. Crew members grieved privately, but there was no time to mourn. The mission was larger than any single ship or crew. The lives of the alien survivors and the safety of the system depended on their persistence. Rhea Morgan worked tirelessly, coordinating with the aliens to identify critical points in the swarm's structure. She analyzed patterns in the Devourer's movement and discovered small vulnerabilities, areas where energy signals overlapped, creating weak points in the swarm's coordination. She relayed this information to Admiral Donovan, who immediately revised the fleet's attack plan. Ships maneuvered to exploit these weaknesses, targeting the swarm's core formations with precision strikes. Every successful hit was small but significant, slowing the Devourer just enough to protect the survivors on the planet. The alien survivors themselves contributed as much as they could. Their knowledge of the planet's energy network allowed the Deathworlders to use the environment against the swarm. Hidden conduits and power nodes were activated, creating electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the Devourer's coordination. The combined effort of human ingenuity and alien knowledge began to turn the tide, but the cost was high. Ships were damaged, energy reserves were drained, and the fleet's losses continued to mount. Amid the chaos, a desperate plan emerged. The aliens revealed an ancient device buried beneath their ruined city, a failsafe they had designed centuries ago, meant to neutralize any threat capable of destroying worlds. It required precise timing and control, and it was risky. The energy released would be enormous and could destroy the planet along with the enemy. Donovan weighed the decision carefully. Evacuate the survivors first and risk the Devourer escaping, or activate the device immediately and accept the collateral damage. There was no perfect choice. The fleet had to trust both their skill and the aliens' guidance. With coordinated effort, the fleet positioned itself around the activation point. Ships held formation under heavy fire, deflecting incoming attacks while transport units moved the survivors to safety zones. Rhea Morgan worked with alien engineers, calculating energy thresholds, stabilizing conduits, and preparing the failsafe for activation. The tension in the control room was palpable. One wrong calculation could destroy the fleet, the planet, and everyone on it. Yet despite the fear, every member of the team remained focused, disciplined, and determined. Finally, the moment came. The device was activated. A blinding pulse of energy radiated outward, consuming the Devourer and the dying star it had been feeding on. The swarm disintegrated into fragments, its energy dissipating into space. The star itself collapsed, leaving a dark void where it had burned. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. The Deathworlders floated in space, exhausted but alive, surrounded by the remnants of the battle. Ships drifted. Sensors recorded fragments of the destroyed swarm, and survivors looked on in awe and gratitude. The cost of victory was immense. Many ships had been destroyed. Countless crew members were injured or lost, and the planet had suffered further damage from the energy release. Yet the survivors were safe, and the Devourer was gone. Donovan allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but knew this was only one battle. The galaxy was vast, and threats like the Devourer could emerge elsewhere. Still, for the moment, they had done the impossible. They had faced a force no one else could stop and had prevailed. Amid the wreckage and the quiet, the Deathworlders helped the aliens stabilize their remaining settlements. Supplies were distributed, shelters repaired, and communications restored. The survivors were exhausted but alive, and they began to rebuild under the protection of their new allies. In those first hours after the battle, the aliens looked at the humans differently. No longer strangers, no longer just visitors, but heroes who had answered a call when no one else dared. Rhea Morgan documented every detail of the battle, recording the patterns of the swarm, the strategies used, and the coordination between human and alien forces. She knew that this information would be invaluable if another threat emerged in the future. The lessons of this encounter were clear. Courage, collaboration, and willingness to act in the face of unimaginable danger could overcome even the most impossible odds. As the Deathworlder fleet regrouped and prepared for departure, the survivors expressed their gratitude in ways words could not capture. Gestures, expressions, and shared silences conveyed what simple speech could not. For the first time in years, they felt hope. They had been rescued not just by technology, but by the human will to protect life, to confront fear, and to act when action was needed most. The battle against the Devourer had left scars, physical, emotional, and psychological, on everyone involved. Ships needed repairs, crew needed rest, and the survivors needed time to recover. Yet despite the losses, there was a sense of triumph. Humanity, represented by the Deathworlders, had faced a force beyond imagination and had prevailed. They had answered the SOS, and in doing so, had proven that even in the darkest reaches of space, life mattered. As the fleet prepared to leave the dying system, the stars beyond seemed brighter, almost welcoming. The alien survivors watched their new allies depart, understanding that their salvation had come from beings willing to stand against death itself. Donovan gave the order to jump to hyperspace, and one by one, the ships vanished into streaks of light. The battle was over, but the story of courage, sacrifice, and unity had just begun. Through all of it, the SOS that had started this chain of events echoed in the hearts of the Deathworlders. A call for help had been answered. And in that answer lay not only survival, but proof that even in the universe's most desperate corners, hope and bravery could shine brighter than the dying stars themselves. After the battle was over, the galaxy seemed quieter, almost peaceful, though the memory of destruction lingered. The surviving ships of the Deathworlder fleet drifted slowly through space, carrying both the alien survivors and the human crew who had fought with unmatched courage. The survivors, once weak and fearful, now looked around in awe at the ships that had saved them. They had come to trust the humans, who had faced a threat far beyond anything they had imagined, and they were beginning to understand that humanity was capable of both recklessness and profound bravery. Commander Rhea Morgan observed the survivors from the bridge of the Resolute. The aliens, though fragile, were beginning to regain strength. They moved slowly but steadily, exploring the ship's corridors, fascinated by human technology and systems. Their luminous eyes reflected curiosity and cautious hope. Many of them approached Rhea and the crew, offering gestures of thanks that transcended language. It was clear that a bond had formed, one built not on words but on shared survival and mutual trust. The SOS that had once carried desperation now carried something else: gratitude, relief, and a newfound hope. As the fleet navigated back toward Earth's territory, Admiral Cale Donovan convened a meeting with his senior officers. They discussed the next steps carefully. The alien civilization was fragile, their numbers reduced drastically, and their technology was mostly in ruins. The fleet would act as guardians, escorting them to safer systems where they could recover and rebuild. Donovan emphasized the importance of not just saving them physically, but also ensuring they regained the confidence to survive and thrive again. The mission had evolved from rescue to protection, and every officer understood the weight of their responsibility. News of the fleet's success spread quickly throughout human colonies. People were astonished to learn that a fleet of humans had answered an SOS across light years, fought a nearly unstoppable enemy, and saved an alien species from extinction. The story captured the imagination of millions. Children drew pictures of glowing aliens shaking hands with human soldiers. Scholars debated the ethical implications of interstellar rescue. Artists painted murals of the battle against the Devourer. Humanity, which had often been portrayed as violent and self-serving, was now seen as courageous and compassionate. The Deathworlders had changed the perception of an entire species with their actions. Meanwhile, the alien survivors began to share their knowledge and culture with the humans. Their history, once almost lost, was now being recorded and preserved. They taught human scientists about their advanced understanding of energy, physics, and even communication. The knowledge gained from these interactions would later revolutionize human technology. But more importantly, it built bridges between species, the kind of connections that could last for generations. The aliens had survived because humans had intervened, but humanity had also survived in a different sense. It had proven its capacity for empathy, courage, and unity across the stars. Rhea Morgan documented everything meticulously. She recorded the events of the battle, the behavior of the Devourer, and the responses of both humans and aliens. She wrote down not only the technical data but also the human stories, the fear, the bravery, the small moments of compassion that had defined the mission. Later, her reports would be studied by military strategists, scientists, and historians alike. The lessons learned from this encounter were invaluable. Humanity now knew that the universe was not empty, and that their choices, to act or to hesitate, could have consequences far beyond their own world. On board the ships, the atmosphere began to shift from tension to reflection. Survivors shared stories of their lost homes and loved ones. Some laughed at small human quirks like the way crew members celebrated minor victories or joked to lighten the mood. Others wept quietly for their dead, mourning the cities and civilizations that had been destroyed. The humans, in turn, shared their experiences of harsh worlds, difficult battles, and the long journey that had brought them here. In these exchanges, mutual respect and understanding deepened. Both species were learning from one another, and the boundaries between them were slowly dissolving. As days passed, the fleet entered safer territory, and the aliens began to adjust to life on board human ships. They learned to navigate corridors, to operate simple devices, and even to communicate more effectively with the humans. They were no longer merely survivors. They were becoming participants in the mission, actively contributing to decisions and assisting with daily operations. The SOS that had once been a desperate plea had transformed into collaboration, and humanity's willingness to act had created a partnership that promised stability, knowledge, and hope. Back on Earth, celebrations were subdued but meaningful. Governments and citizens alike honored the fleet's bravery. Memorials were held for the crew members who had been lost in battle, and those who returned were recognized not just as soldiers, but as heroes who had exemplified the best qualities of humanity. The public began to understand that the universe was full of unknown dangers, but also full of opportunities to do good. Humanity had answered a call from the stars and, in doing so, had proven that courage, empathy, and determination could make a difference even in the face of overwhelming odds. The alien survivors began to adapt their technology with the help of human engineers. They repaired critical systems, rebuilt communication arrays, and restored energy grids. Slowly, the faint glow of civilization returned to the planet they had once called home. Children who had been too young to understand the devastation before now played in areas that had been cleared of debris. Adults began to rebuild their homes, their workshops, and their cultural centers. It was a painstaking process, but the presence of the Deathworlders gave them confidence. Humanity had not only saved their lives, but had shown them that survival was possible, even after near-total destruction. As the fleet prepared to depart, the survivors held a ceremony to honor their human rescuers. There were no words that could fully capture the gratitude, so they used symbols, music, and gestures. Bright lights illuminated the ship docks, and the alien species' unique language filled the air in a melodic, almost musical form. The humans responded in kind, acknowledging their courage and sacrifice. It was a moment that transcended cultures and species, a celebration of life and unity that would be remembered for generations. Even after the immediate danger had passed, lessons from the encounter continued to resonate. Human military strategies were rewritten to incorporate techniques learned from the aliens. Scientific research accelerated, fueled by the new knowledge shared by the survivors. And most importantly, the moral of the mission spread across the galaxy. When someone calls for help, answering that call may change the course of history. The SOS that had once echoed in the void had now become a symbol of connection, courage, and hope. Rhea Morgan reflected on the mission's impact. She thought about the first time she detected the signal, the fear and uncertainty that followed, and the incredible journey that had unfolded. Humanity had stepped into the unknown and faced it with resilience. They had fought against a nearly unstoppable force, saved a species from extinction, and learned that empathy and bravery could reach across the stars. The story of the SOS would not only be a lesson in survival, but also in what it meant to be human, to act, to care, and to stand for life even when the odds seemed impossible. Admiral Donovan, looking out over the ships and the surviving aliens, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had faced death itself and answered a call when no one else could or would. The fleet had paid a price, but the reward was immeasurable. Lives saved, bonds forged, and a galaxy reminded that hope could exist even in the darkest reaches of space. The mission had transformed them all. Humans were no longer just explorers or warriors. They had become guardians, legends, and symbols of life's resilience. As the Deathworlder fleet set course for the nearest safe system, The aliens began to tell stories of the humans to their children, stories that would survive for generations. They spoke of bravery, of sacrifice, and of a species willing to cross the void simply to help others. The SOS that had started as a desperate plea had now become a tale of inspiration, a tale of how life, courage, and hope could shine brighter than the deadest stars in the universe. Even in the silent stretches of space, the impact of the mission was felt. Humanity had answered a cry for help from the darkest corner of the galaxy, proving that when life called, they would come. The survivors, strengthened and inspired, were beginning to rebuild their civilization with confidence, knowing that allies existed among the stars. And the humans who had risked everything returned home not only as victors of an impossible battle, but as the living embodiment of compassion, courage, and the promise that a call for help would never go unanswered again. In the end, the galaxy had changed. The SOS that had echoed through space was no longer just a signal of desperation. It was a reminder, a story that would be told for centuries, that when someone reaches out, hope can be answered. Humanity had done more than save lives. They had proved that in the vast, dangerous universe, bravery, empathy, and the will to act could make all the difference. And somewhere among the stars, the survivors looked up, knew they were not alone, and smiled with the certainty that the Deathworlders would always come when needed.